At 18, you're not supposed to inherit a ghost. But on the day I was kicked out of my last group home, my sister and I bought an abandoned ranch for $1. And what we discovered there would change not just our lives, but the very story of our family. This isn't just a story about property. It's about what it means to reclaim a past you thought was gone forever. If you've ever felt lost, or like you've been left behind, maybe this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button, because we're going to talk about what happens when you decide to stop running and start building. The day I turned 18 felt less like a birthday and more like an eviction. The finality of it was quiet, almost insultingly mundane. There was no party, no cake, just a single, sad-looking cardboard box on the linoleum floor of the group home's administrative office. It contained 2 pairs of jeans, a handful of faded t-shirts, my worn copy of a book I'd read 100 times, and a toothbrush. 2 years of my life, condensed into a box I could carry with one arm. The house manager, a woman named Carol, whose face was permanently fixed in an expression of mild disappointment, handed me a manila envelope. Inside was my birth certificate, my social security card, and $75 in cash. "Happy birthday, Leo," she said, her voice as flat as the gray sky outside. "The bus station is 3 blocks east. Good luck." She didn't look at me when she said it. They never did. It was easier for them if you were just a file being closed, a problem being transferred. I walked out the front door, the lock clicking behind me with a sound of profound indifference. The air was cold, biting at my exposed skin, a harsh welcome to the world of legal adulthood. I stood on that cracked pavement, the box under my arm, and felt a hollowness so vast it threatened to swallow the tiny spark of hope I was trying to protect. That spark had a name: Maya, my sister. She was 16, still inside, still caught in the gears of the same system that had just spit me out. My only real responsibility in the world was to her, a promise I'd made to myself in the dark of a dozen different temporary bedrooms. I bought a bus ticket to nowhere in particular, just a town a few hours away where I'd heard there was work. As I sat there, watching the city blur into suburbs and then into long stretches of frozen farmland, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I almost ignored it. It was probably a wrong number, or worse, someone from the home telling me I'd forgotten to sign a form. But something made me answer. "Hello?" A woman's voice, crisp and professional, came through the line. "Am I speaking with Leo Vance?" I confirmed it was me, my own voice sounding rough and unfamiliar. "Mr. Vance, my name is Sarah Albright. I'm an attorney. I've been trying to locate you and your sister, Maya Vance. I am the executor of your grandfather's estate." The words didn't compute. Grandfather, estate. These were words from movies, from books about rich people. They had nothing to do with me. Our grandfather, Thomas Vance, was a ghost. He'd taken us in for 6 months after our parents died, a whirlwind of grief and confusion in his dusty, quiet house. And then one day, he was just gone. A note on the kitchen table said he was sorry. The next day, social services came. We never heard from him again. He had abandoned us. That was the story we knew. That was the story that had defined the last 12 years of our lives. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice tight. "You must have the wrong person. Our grandfather passed away years ago." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "No, Mr. Vance," she said gently. "He passed away 6 weeks ago. He left something for you, for both of you. It's complicated. Can you come to my office? It's in North Creek." I looked out the bus window. The sign for the North Creek exit was just ahead. It felt like the universe was playing a cruel joke. "I'm on a bus to North Creek right now," I said, the words feeling like they belonged to someone else. "Good," Ms. Albright replied, a hint of relief in her voice. "Then I'll see you in an hour." Ms. Albright's office was in a small, respectable brick building on what passed for Main Street in North Creek. It smelled of old paper and lemon polish, a scent so different from the institutional bleach of the group home that it made me feel dizzy. She was a woman in her late 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor that was both reassuring and intimidating. She didn't treat me like a stray. She treated me like a client. She gestured for me to sit, and I perched awkwardly on the edge of a leather chair that was probably worth more than everything in my cardboard box. "Thank you for coming, Leo," she began, folding her hands on the polished surface of her desk. "As I said, I'm the executor of your grandfather's will. It's unconventional." She slid a thick sheaf of papers across the desk. "Your grandfather, Thomas, never stopped thinking about you and Maya. For reasons that I believe will become clear, he felt he could not be in your lives directly. But he spent the last decade preparing for this day, your 18th birthday." My heart was pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs. "He left you his property," she said, her gaze steady. "A ranch, about 80 acres, just outside of town." I stared at her, speechless. A ranch. It was an absurd concept. "But there are conditions. Significant ones." She took a deep breath. "The property has been, for legal purposes, listed as abandoned for the last 10 years. As a result, there is a substantial amount of back taxes owed, over $90,000. The flicker of impossible hope died in my chest, replaced by a bitter, familiar disappointment. Of course, there was always a catch. "Additionally," she continued, "a development corporation, Omnicorp, has been buying up land in the area. They placed a lien on your grandfather's property years ago for an old, unpaid debt and have been paying the minimum to keep it active. They are scheduled to foreclose and seize the property in exactly 72 hours. She let that sink in. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. "So we get nothing," I said flatly. It wasn't a question. "Not exactly," Ms. Albright said, leaning forward. "Your grandfather was a very clever, if complicated man. He set up a testamentary trust with a very specific, very strange provision. It gives you and your sister the exclusive first right to repurchase the property from the estate for a symbolic sum, provided you can clear the external debts before the foreclosure deadline. The sum he specified was $1. I just stared at her. $1. It was a joke, a cruel, elaborate joke played on two kids who had nothing. "What's the point?" I asked, the frustration making my voice shake. "We don't have $90,000. We don't have $90. I have $75 and a bus ticket." Ms. Albright's expression softened. "I know. Your grandfather knew that as well. He left you something else, a key and a letter." She slid a small, ornate iron key and a thick, yellowed envelope across the desk. The key was heavy, old-fashioned. My grandfather's name, Thomas Vance, was written on the envelope in a shaky but familiar hand. His instructions were clear. I was to give you this on your 18th birthday. The letter, he said, would explain everything. He believed that what you would find at the ranch would be more than enough to solve the problem of the taxes. She looked at me, her professional calm cracking just a little to show the sympathy beneath. "Leo, I don't know what's in that letter," or what, if anything, is waiting for you at that ranch. But your grandfather was insistent. He called it your true inheritance. You have 72 hours. Omnicorp's lawyers are sharks. They will not grant an extension. If you want to claim this, you have to go now. And you have to succeed. I picked up the key. It was cold and solid in my hand, a real object in a situation that felt like a dream, a nightmare. I thought of Maya, stuck in that sterile room, probably wondering where I was. I thought of the promise I'd made. This was insane. It was a fool's errand, a wild goose chase designed by a man who'd already broken our hearts once. But it was also the only thing I had. It was the first time in 12 years that someone had offered me a door, even if it was a locked one on the verge of being torn down. "How do I get there?" I asked. The taxi ride to the ranch was a journey back in time. The driver was an old man with a kind, weathered face who told me he remembered my grandfather. "Thomas Vance? Sure. Quiet man. Kept to himself, especially after his wife passed," he said, his eyes meeting mine in the rearview mirror. Fiercely proud of that land, though. My dad sold him his first tractor. It's a shame what happened. Place has been sitting empty for a decade. Kids used to dare each other to go up there, say it was haunted. He fell silent as we turned off the paved road onto a long, unkempt gravel drive. The cab rattled and groaned, kicking up dust. And then I saw it. The house was set back from the road, a 2-story farmhouse that had once been white, but was now a peeling, ghostly gray. The porch sagged in the middle, like it was tired of holding itself up. Windows were boarded over, and the roof had a gaping hole on one side, a dark wound against the pale sky. The barn next to it was even worse off, its great doors hanging crookedly from their hinges. The whole place was being slowly swallowed by nature. Weeds choked the yard, and wild vines climbed the walls of the house, their tendrils reaching for the roof. It didn't look abandoned, it looked defeated. The driver pulled to a stop by a rusted, fallen gate. "This is as far as I go," he said, his voice soft. "Good luck, son. I hope you find what you're looking for." I paid him, grabbing my box and the envelope. He turned the car around and drove away, leaving me alone in a cloud of dust and deafening silence. I was standing at the edge of my inheritance, a ruin, a memory, a $90,000 problem. I took a deep breath, the air tasting of decay and damp earth. I walked up the overgrown path to the front door. The iron key Ms. Albright had given me felt heavy in my trembling hand. I slid it into the lock. It was stiff with rust and disuse, but after a moment of resistance, it turned with a loud, grating click that echoed in the stillness. I pushed the door open. A wave of musty, stale air washed over me. The inside of the house was a tomb. Dust lay thick on everything, a gray shroud covering furniture that was draped in white sheets, making the room look like it was full of ghosts. Sunlight struggled through the grimy, boarded-up windows, cutting dusty, golden shafts through the gloom. A grand stone fireplace stood cold and dark on the far wall. On the mantelpiece, a calendar was still turned to October, 12 years ago, the month he left. I walked through the downstairs rooms, my footsteps echoing unnaturally. The kitchen was frozen in time. A coffee cup sat by the sink. In the living room, a rocking chair was positioned by the window, as if someone had just gotten up for a moment. It was profoundly, deeply sad. This wasn't just an abandoned house. It was a life interrupted. A home that had died. I felt a surge of anger at my grandfather. What was I supposed to find here? A fortune hidden under a floorboard? It was a fantasy. The place was a wreck. It would cost a fortune to make it livable, even if I could somehow pay the taxes. I called Maya. I had to tell her. Her voice was a small, anxious thread in the vast, empty house. "Leo, where are you? Are you okay?" I tried to keep my voice steady. "I'm okay, May. I'm at Grandpa's house." I explained everything Ms. Albright had told me. The will, the taxes, the $1 price tag, the 72-hour deadline. "A ranch?" she whispered, the word full of a child's wonder. Is it nice?" I looked around at the decay, the dust, the ghosts of a life we'd almost had. I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. Not yet. "It's big, May," I said, my throat tight. "It's really big. But it needs some work." I had to give her that little piece of hope to hold on to. After I hung up, the weight of it all crashed down on me. I was 18 years old, standing in a derelict house I might own for $1, with less than 3 days to find a treasure that probably didn't exist. I sank down onto a sheet-covered sofa, the dust puffing up around me. I felt the thick envelope in my jacket pocket. The letter. With trembling hands, I pulled it out. It was time for the ghost to speak. The paper was thick and brittle. I broke the wax seal, my heart hammering. His handwriting was just as I remembered it from the one birthday card I'd kept, spidery and elegant. "My dearest Leo and Maya," it began. "If you are reading this, then it means I am gone, and you, Leo, are a man. I hope the years have been as kind to you as they could be. I know you must hate me. You have every right to. I want you to know the one thing that matters most. I never stopped loving you, not for a single moment. Leaving you was the hardest thing I have ever done, and it has been my life's great regret and my life's necessary sacrifice." I had to stop and take a breath. The words were a physical blow. I read on. "When your grandmother, Eleanor, got sick, I did everything I could. The treatments were expensive, more than a farmer's savings could ever cover. I sold off livestock, equipment, a parcel of land to the north. It wasn't enough. I was desperate. And desperate men make foolish bargains. A man came to me, representing a small, private lending company. He offered me a loan. The terms were steep, but he seemed understanding. He said it was an investment in the community. I was a fool. I signed the papers. The company was a predator, a front for something much larger and more sinister. A company that would eventually be absorbed by what is now Omnicorp Development. The loan was a trap, designed so it could never be fully repaid. After Eleanor passed, they came for their pound of flesh. They didn't want the money. They wanted the land. They wanted my signature on a sales contract. But this ranch, this land, it was your grandmother's heart. It was meant to be your future. I refused. My hands were shaking. I could picture him, a proud, stubborn old man, facing down men in suits. They started to apply pressure, threats, not just to me. They talked about you, about what happens to children when their guardians fall into legal trouble, into debt. They made it clear that as long as you were with me, you were leverage. They could have me declared an unfit guardian, have you taken away and put me in a position where I would have no choice but to sign over the ranch to get you back. They were going to use you to break me, so I had to make a choice, a terrible, impossible choice. I could keep you with me, and in doing so, risk your safety and guarantee we would all lose everything. Or I could disappear. If I was gone, I was no longer your legal guardian. The debt, the threats, they were tied to me. I could sever the chain. The state, for all its flaws, was a safer place for you than I was. I chose to let you go so that you might, one day, have a chance to come back. I wrote that note and walked away from my own life. It broke my heart, but I believed it was the only way to save yours and to save this place for you. I dropped the letter, my face in my hands. The story I had told myself for 12 years, the story of abandonment, of being unwanted, crumbled into dust. He hadn't left us. He had protected us, the only way he knew how. It was a sacrifice so profound I could barely comprehend it. I wasn't an abandoned child. I was a protected one. And this ruined, decaying ranch wasn't a burden. It was a fortress he had died to defend. I cried. I cried for the grandfather I had hated for a decade, for the man who had given up everything. I cried for the lost years, and I cried for the boy who had felt so utterly alone, not knowing he was the subject of a fierce, hidden love. When the tears finally stopped, a new feeling had taken root in the hollow space in my chest. A cold, hard resolve. This wasn't just about money or land anymore. This was about justice. It was about finishing the fight my grandfather had started. The revelation changed everything, but it solved nothing. The 72-hour clock was still ticking. In fact, it was closer to 48 now. I had the why, but I still didn't have the how. The letter was a map of the past, not the future. I picked it up and read the last paragraph again. I have done what I can to give you a fighting chance, Leo. I lived a frugal life after I left. I saved. I planned. This house is not just a home, it is a vault. Your grandmother used to say, I could hide sunshine in a shadow. Look for the place where the work was done, where the sweat of my life soaked into the wood. The answer is there. Don't let them win. Make this place your home. It's all I have ever wanted for you. The place where the work was done. The barn. It had to be the barn. The sun was setting, casting long, distorted shadows across the overgrown yard. A deep, primal fear tried to take hold. The barn was a dark, hulking shape, its open maw of a door like a mouth waiting to swallow me. The stories the taxi driver told me about it being haunted felt a little too real right now. But the image of my grandfather's face, the memory of his sacrifice, was stronger than the fear. I found an old oil lantern in the kitchen. It was dry, but there was a can of fuel, miraculously, in the pantry. After fumbling with it for 10 minutes, I managed to get a sputtering golden flame to life. Holding it aloft, I stepped out into the twilight and walked toward the barn. The air grew colder as I approached. The huge doors groaned in protest as I forced one open just wide enough to slip through. The smell inside was thick and rich. Old hay, dust, oil, and the faint, sweet scent of rotting wood. The lantern cast dancing, monstrous shadows on the high raftered ceiling. Old, rusted farm equipment sat like sleeping iron beasts. Stalls stood empty, their doors ajar. It was even more intimidating than the house. The place where the sweat of my life soaked into the wood, I whispered to myself, repeating his words like a mantra. I ran my hand along the walls, the rough-hewn planks worn smooth in some places. I started in the main area, checking every corner, every loose board I could find. Nothing. I moved to the stalls, my light disturbing thick cobwebs that had been undisturbed for a decade. Nothing. An hour passed, then 2. My hope began to fray. Maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe the money was long gone, stolen by vandals or eaten by rats. Maybe this was all for nothing. Then I saw it. Tucked away in the back, almost completely hidden by a collapsed stack of old hay bales, was a smaller door. It led to a workshop. I had to clear the hay, the decaying bales falling apart in my hands, filling the air with dust that made me choke. Finally, I cleared a path. The door was stuck fast. I put my shoulder into it, once, twice, and on the third try, it burst open with a crack of splintering wood. The workshop was his sanctuary. I knew it instantly. A long, heavy workbench stood against the far wall, covered in tools that were neatly arranged, despite a layer of dust. Vices, clamps, saws, and hammers, all waiting for a hand that would never hold them again. The air here felt different. It felt personal. This was the heart of his life on the ranch. I started my search again, more methodically this time. I ran my hands over the workbench, feeling for any irregularity in the wood. It was solid, scarred by years of work, but seamless. I checked the walls, tapping them, listening for a hollow sound. Nothing. I was about to give up, to sink to the floor in defeat, when my lantern light caught something on the floor. Under the workbench, the floorboards were different. While the rest of the barn floor was made of wide, rough planks, this small section was made of newer, smoother wood, the nails fresh and clean compared to the rusted ones elsewhere. My heart leaped. I dropped to my knees. There was no handle, no seam, but at one edge I found a tiny notch, just big enough to get my fingertips into. I pulled. The board resisted, then lifted. Beneath it was not dirt, but a hollow space, and nestled inside that space was a heavy steel lockbox. It was a different box from the one with the letter. This one was larger, heavier, and sealed with a combination lock. My hope soared, then crashed again. A combination. It could be anything. I tried his birthday. Nothing. My grandmother's birthday. Nothing. My birthday. Maya's. The date he left. I tried for what felt like an eternity. I was on the verge of trying to smash it open with a hammer when I remembered the locket. The locket that had been in the first box with the letter. I had put it in my pocket without thinking. I pulled it out. It was tarnished silver with an intricate design of vines etched on the front. I opened it. Inside, on one side, was a tiny, faded picture of my grandmother. On the other, where a picture of my grandfather should have been, were 4 numbers, delicately scratched into the metal. 8, 4, 6, 2. My breath caught. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot I had. With trembling fingers, I spun the dials on the lockbox. 8, 4, 6, 2. I pulled the latch. It clicked open. I lifted the heavy lid. Inside, my grandfather's impossible promise was made real. Stacked in neat, tight bundles, held together by rubber bands, was cash. I counted it, my hands shaking so badly I kept losing my place. 10,000, 20, 50, 90. It was all there. $95,000. Enough to pay the taxes, with $5,000 to spare. But that wasn't all. Beneath the money was another envelope, even thicker than the first. And on top of it, a single folded document. The deed to the property. Free and clear, except for the taxes. I opened the second letter. His handwriting was firmer this time, less emotional, more tactical. Leo, it read. If you found this, you found your choice. The money is yours. It will clear the debt to the state. It will give you a clean slate. You have 2 paths now, and I will not choose for you. This is your life. Path 1. You pay the taxes and you sell the property. Omnicorp will likely make you a generous offer. It would be enough money for you and Maya to start a new life, anywhere you want. A college education, a nice apartment in a city, a life free from all of this. There is no shame in this choice. It is the choice for peace. It is the easy road, and you have earned an easy road. I paused, the thought of it tempting. A clean break, money, a normal life for Maya. It was everything I thought I wanted. I read on. Path 2, you fight. You pay the taxes and you refuse to sell. You make this place your home. It will be hard. The house needs a man's work. The land needs a farmer's soul. It will take everything you have, but it will be yours, truly yours. To help you, I have left you my final weapon. In this envelope, you will find everything I gathered on the men who trapped me. Copies of the original loan document with its illegal, predatory clauses. A ledger I kept, tracking their payments and their threats. A sworn affidavit from another farmer they ruined. It's not enough to send them to prison, perhaps, but it's more than enough to expose their business practices to the world. Omnicorp is a giant, but giants hate the light. Show this to your lawyer. It is your shield. The choice is yours, son, to take the money and run from the past, or to use this place to build a future from it. Whatever you choose, know that my love is with you. Your grandfather. I sat there in the dusty workshop, the lantern light flickering, the smell of old wood and cold cash filling my senses. The easy road, the hard road. For 12 years, I had been carried along by a system I couldn't control. I'd been given rooms, meals, rules. I had never been given a real choice, not one that mattered. Now, I had one. A choice between a comfortable escape and a difficult home. A choice between forgetting and fighting. I thought of Maya. What kind of future did I want for her? A life built on money from the people who destroyed our family? Or a life built on the land they tried to steal? A home forged from resilience and defiance? The answer was clear. It was terrifying, but it was clear. I pulled out my phone. The signal was weak, but it was there. I dialed Ms. Albright's number. It was late, but she answered on the second ring. "Leo, is everything all right?" "I found it," I said, my voice hoarse with emotion. "I found the money, and I found the evidence." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "What do you want to do?" she asked, her voice all business again. I looked around the workshop, at my grandfather's tools, at the deed in my hand. "I want you to wire the tax payment to the county first thing in the morning," I said. "And then I want you to call Omnicorp. Tell them the property is no longer for sale, at any price. We're staying." The next 24 hours were a blur of nervous energy. Ms. Albright did as I asked. She wired the $90,000 to the county tax assessor's office, officially clearing the debt. The property was ours. Then she sent a certified letter to Omnicorp's legal department, along with a polite but firm email, informing them that the Vance family had reclaimed the property and had no interest in selling. She also attached a single, scanned page from my grandfather's evidence, the predatory loan agreement. It was a warning shot. The response was almost immediate. A lawyer from Omnicorp called her, blustering and threatening. He talked about their lien, about breach of contract. Ms. Albright, in her calm, unshakable way, simply stated that the original loan was made under fraudulent pretenses and that we had substantial documentation to prove it in a court of law. not to mention with the press. The man's tone changed. He said he'd have to consult with his superiors. A few hours later, a different lawyer called. This one was smooth, conciliatory. He offered us a settlement. They would forgive the original debt, the debt my grandfather's evidence proved was illegal anyway, and pay us $100,000 for our trouble in exchange for the land. It was tempting. Another easy way out. I talked it over with Maya on the phone. "It's blood money, Leo," she said, her voice filled with a conviction that made me proud. "It's not worth it. I'd rather be poor in our own home than rich in some apartment they paid for." She was right. We told Ms. Albright to refuse. The final call came late that afternoon. The lawyer was curt. Omnicorp was officially withdrawing its lien and dropping all claims to the property. They wanted the original documents my grandfather had collected. Ms. Albright agreed after making certified copies of everything. It was over. We had won. The victory felt quiet, almost anticlimactic. There was no grand explosion, just a series of phone calls and emails. The monster had retreated not with a roar, but with a quiet click of a lawyer hanging up the phone. But it was real. The ranch was ours, free and clear, for $1 and the price of a ghost's sacrifice. I want to take a moment here and just talk to you, the person watching this. If you've made it this far into the story, it's probably because some part of this resonates with you. Maybe it's the feeling of being up against a system that feels too big to fight. Maybe it's the idea of uncovering a family secret that changes everything you thought you knew. Or maybe it's just that deep human longing for a place to call home. For me and Maya, this was the moment where everything shifted. We went from being victims of our circumstances to being the authors of our own future. And that choice, that single moment of deciding to fight instead of flee, was terrifying. Have you ever had a moment like that in your life? A crossroads where the easy path was right there, shimmering and tempting, but your heart told you to take the hard road. If you have, I want you to know you're not alone. This community we're building here, it's for people who understand that the most meaningful things in life are the ones you have to fight for. Let me know in the comments about a time you chose the harder path. I promise you, I read them all. Your stories matter. Now, let's get back to what happened next. Because winning the fight was just the beginning. The real work was about to start. With the legal battle won, the reality of our situation settled in. We owned 80 acres of beautiful wild land and a collection of buildings that were barely standing. The $5,000 left over from my grandfather's stash wouldn't go far. The first thing I did was call Maya's social worker. I explained the situation, with Ms. Albright backing me up. I was now a legal adult with a permanent residence and a very small amount of financial stability. I wanted to petition for legal guardianship of my sister. It was a long shot, but for the first time, it wasn't an impossible one. While the bureaucracy churned slowly, I started the work. The house was the first priority. I spent a week just cleaning. I filled dozens of trash bags with ruined, moldy junk. I tore out rotting carpets, pulled down water-stained drywall, and scrubbed every surface until my arms ached. I took down the boards from the windows, letting fresh air and sunlight into the house for the first time in a decade. It was back-breaking, thankless work. Every day I would find a new problem: a leaky pipe, a nest of mice in a wall, a section of floor so rotten you could see the ground beneath it. There were moments of overwhelming despair, where I would sit in the middle of a dusty, half-demolished room and think, I can't do this. But then I would think of my grandfather's letter. It will take everything you have. and I would think of Maya's voice on the phone each night, full of excitement and hope, asking me what I'd fixed that day. And I would get back up. I became a student of 100 different trades. I learned how to patch a roof from watching videos on my phone, perched precariously on a ladder. I learned basic plumbing from an old book I found in the workshop. I learned how to mix cement to patch the foundation. The local hardware store owner, a gruff but kind man named Mr. Henderson, started giving me discounts. He'd known my grandfather, too. "Your grandpa was a good man," he said one day, loading a bag of concrete into my beat-up truck, which I'd managed to get running. "Stubborn as a mule, but good. He'd be proud of you, son." The community, which had at first seemed distant and unwelcoming, began to slowly open up. The sheriff would cruise by on his patrols and stop for a minute. Neighbors I hadn't even met would leave a basket of vegetables on the porch. They were watching. They were waiting. They were seeing if we would stick it out. And we were. The best day was the day Maya arrived. After 2 months of paperwork and legal wrangling, the court approved my petition for guardianship. Ms. Albright drove her out from the city. I was standing on the porch, which I had finally managed to level and reinforce, when the car pulled up. Maya got out and just stood there, staring. The lawn was mowed. The house had a fresh coat of cheap white paint on the front. I'd planted a small, clumsy-looking garden with some tomato and zucchini plants. It wasn't perfect. It was far from perfect. But it looked like a home. It looked alive. Maya's eyes filled with tears. She ran to me, and I held her, my own eyes burning. "It's real," she whispered into my shoulder. "It's really ours." Her arrival changed the dynamic of the work. It was no longer my solitary struggle. It was our shared project. She had a knack for things I didn't. While I was wrestling with plumbing and electricity, she was turning the house into a home. She found old curtains in a trunk, washed and mended them, and hung them in the windows. She refinished a small wooden table we found in the attic. She painted her room a bright, cheerful yellow. She filled the quiet, dusty house with laughter and music from a small radio. We fell into a rhythm. We'd work all day on the property, and in the evenings we'd sit on the porch and watch the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. We talked for hours, catching up on the years we'd lost, sharing stories of the different foster homes, the different schools. We were healing the broken pieces of our childhood, one conversation at a time. We explored the land together, hiking through the woods and fields that were now ours. We found a creek at the edge of the property, its water clear and cold. We found an old apple orchard, the trees gnarled but still producing small, tart apples. We were discovering not just the land, but the legacy my grandfather had preserved for us. One evening, as we were sitting by the creek, Maya turned to me. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked quietly. "The city? A normal life?" I thought about it for a moment. I thought about the noise, the crowds, the anonymity. I thought about the easy money we could have had from Omnicore. "No," I said, and I was surprised by how true it was. I don't. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. A year passed. The ranch transformed, and so did we. The hole in the roof was patched. The plumbing no longer leaked. The garden was thriving. We'd even managed to buy a few chickens, which strutted around the yard like they owned the place. We weren't farmers, not yet, but we were learning. We were stewards of this land my grandfather had loved so fiercely. I was no longer the haunted, angry kid who had walked out of the group home with a cardboard box. The physical labor had hardened my body, but the purpose behind it had softened my heart. The anger I'd held on to for so long had been replaced by a deep, quiet gratitude. I understood my grandfather now. I understood that his greatest act of love was the one that looked like abandonment. He hadn't given us an inheritance of money. He'd given us an inheritance of resilience. He'd given us a story we could be proud of, a foundation on which to build our own lives. Maya blossomed. Away from the sterile, restrictive environment of the system, she became the person she was always meant to be, bright, funny, and fiercely creative. She started taking online classes, thinking about college. She talked about wanting to be a veterinarian. The ranch, our home, had given her the safety and stability to dream. One cool autumn evening, we were sitting on the porch, much like we did every night. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke from our newly repaired fireplace. We had just finished dinner. It wasn't fancy, just vegetables from our garden and eggs from our chickens, but it felt like a feast. Maya was sketching in a notebook, the house behind us, warm and glowing. "I found something today," she said, not looking up from her drawing. "In the workshop, tucked in the back of one of Grandpa's old books." She handed me a small, faded photograph. It was of our grandfather and grandmother, standing in front of the house. They were young, smiling. The house behind them was freshly painted, the lawn was neat, and the porch was straight and strong. They looked so happy, so full of hope. On the back, in my grandmother's elegant script, it said, "Our forever home, June 1975. I looked from the photo to the house in front of me. It wasn't the same pristine home from the picture. It was scarred. It was patched. It bore the marks of neglect and the marks of our struggle to bring it back. But it was standing. It was ours. It was our forever home, too." "He'd be proud, you know," Maya said softly, finally looking at me. "Grandpa, he'd be really proud of us." "Yeah," I said, my voice thick. "I think he would." So that's our story, or the beginning of it anyway. We took a legacy of pain, sacrifice, and abandonment, and we chose to build it into a home. We learned that an inheritance isn't always something that's given to you. Sometimes it's something you have to fight for, bleed for, and build with your own two hands. It's not about the dollar amount. It's about the value you create. This ranch, this land, it taught us that home isn't just a place you live. It's the story you tell yourself about who you are and where you belong. For years, our story was that we were the kids who got left behind. Now, our story is that we are the kids who came home. Maybe the abandoned ranch in your life isn't a piece of property. Maybe it's a broken relationship you need to mend. Maybe it's a dream you gave up on that's waiting to be reclaimed. Maybe it's a story about your own past that you need to reread, to look for the hidden love and sacrifice between the lines of pain. Whatever it is, I hope our story gives you a little bit of hope. I hope it reminds you that you are stronger than you think, and that you have the power to choose your own ending. If this story meant something to you, if you believe in the power of second chances and the meaning of home, I'd be honored if you'd hit that subscribe button and join our community. We share stories here about real life, about the hard fights and the quiet victories, and I want you to share yours. In the comments below, tell me, what is the abandoned ranch in your life that you are fighting to reclaim? I will read every single one, because I believe every story of rebuilding matters. Thank you for listening, and remember, you're not alone in this.
Are you twerking? Are you twerking right now, Nelly? What? She's apologizing for twerking. Twerking while typing, a multitasking queen. I mean, here's the thing, like, if you can do it, you might as well do it. Dinah, what other reason might Nelly be saying the word twerking? Oh, okay, I'm back on track now. Listen, okay, I don't know what y'all are up to, okay? You could be doing anything right now. Nelly could literally be at the club throwing it back and watching the stream, and I would have no idea. You never know. Could you imagine? I did imagine. That's what I thought was happening. Been laughed that hard in forever. There's this artist. Um, her name is Queen Herbie, and one of the intros to her songs, like newest songs, um, is literally her just talking, and she's like mocking somebody, saying like, "Oh, that's unrealistic," blah blah blah. And after that, she was, "Not for you, you unwhimsical bitch." And that's just how her song starts, and it's so funny. My old bones can't handle that. I'm dying, Manuel. OMG, I love you for bringing up Queen Herbie right now. Yeah, I do like this room. Okay, where did Raichu go? We definitely lost them. Did they finish? No. What the hell?